Hi, welcome. Would you please introduce yourself to people who are watching this video?
Hi, my name is Jeanelle Austin, and I am the founder of Racial Agency Initiative.
Great. And would you talk a little bit about your particular giftedness and especially the things that you're about that show up as important in a time as challenging as the one we're living in?
Yeah, so the work that I do, I don't know if I'd say it's my particular giftedness, but the work that I am called to do is pursuing racial justice and doing that from a position and place of joy. And in this time and season of a pandemic, which um, very few people who are still living have known, um, I I've come to realize that this work is still essential and necessary because many of the inequities and the racial inequities that we saw as existing in our world prior to the pandemic still exist. I think they are overshadowed by the pandemic, but the people who are suffering from these injustices still have that burden resting on them. And then there is the burden that is caused by the pandemic on top of that. And so um, I've come to realize that my work doesn't stop just because the economy has stopped in many ways. So the economy hasn't completely stopped, but with so many businesses shutting down and things having to be put on pause and hold, I have had to start thinking and creating ways to say, okay, how can we still keep these kinds of conversations going? How can we ensure that people don't forget and see the intersectionality between racial injustices and the systems that exist in our society? And the very fact that racism is also often fueled by fear. So instantly we saw the anti-Asian sentiment. And so I partnered with an organization called Make America Dinner Again to put on conversations online for people to talk about that, to think about the fact that, hey, the fear that we have driving us into racist attitudes is actually going to set us back as we're trying to come together as a community. So
Thank you. And so out of your work, and I know
mm-hmm.
you're working on a book, so maybe you'll mention your book as well. What kind of advice do you have for people who are, trying to get through day to day and figure out how to live life in a time like this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the core of the advice that I have for people is to hold on to joy. And I mentioned earlier that pursuing racial justice with joy is the vision for my organization, the vision for my life. And I have found that joy is a source of renewable energy. And it allows us to be able to keep going even through difficult times, finding the silver lining in things, finding the hope, finding the things that make us happy, and to lean into those things, finding our strengths and leaning into our strengths, so that we can be renewed. And when we wake up to face a world that is full of sorrow and full of pain and suffering and death, facing this pandemic, that we can ground and root ourselves in joy. And that is essentially critical for those who are fighting the virus,
Mm-hmm.
fighting systemic injustices, fighting anything that we see as problematic in our world today. Positioning ourselves from a place of joy, I think, will help us get there, help us move forward. Yeah.
So is there a question that's been just kind of looping through your mind, your heart, or your both, as both of those as you go through this?
Um, a question that has been looping through my heart or my mind. So every day I lead a group of people on Facebook who were praying through the Psalms. And we're just kind of going at a pace that works for us. But the plan is one Psalm a day. We started back in November. And each day we read a Psalm and we just kind of personally reflect on that Psalm and whatever prayer that we might offer or meditation that we might offer, we gift it to that Facebook group. And it's an open public Facebook group. And as I've navigated through the Psalms, I begin to think a lot and wonder about, especially during the time of this pandemic, how do we navigate everything that's going on in the world, as in the earth, the physical earth itself, and then its impact on us as human beings, and still being able then to come and position ourselves to a place of praise and a place of joy. So I have a master's of divinity, so I've studied theology for a very long time, and I think I've come across many people who've asked those questions of, like, why are bad things happening? Why isn't God stopping this? Why is there so much pain and suffering and death? Why this virus? And then reading the Psalms, I said to myself, well, the Psalms talks a lot about the earth crying out to God and praising God. And part of me wondered, well, I wonder, does the earth ever say, Lord, why do these humans keep on messing with me? And, but yet the earth finds a way to praise in these pictures of the Psalms. And so I begin to use what we call a sanctified imagination in some spaces, and to say, well, if I were to position myself in the way that I see creation positioning itself in the Psalms, it's that space of praise. And so, yes, there are things that are happening in the world that are bad, and yes, we cry out to God, and yes, we acknowledge the pain and the suffering, but the pain and the suffering does not take away our ability to praise God, and nor does it take God's authority away of still being on the throne and still being sovereign. And and if anything, it's still we keep the hope that God is able to deliver us out of this time of sorrow and pain and suffering, even if we find ourselves having to go through it, and through it together. And so I have found consolation in the Psalms, and I've found that the Psalms have kind of raised the questions for me and answered it by saying, yes, the pain and the suffering is difficult to go through, but praise ye the Lord. and that's the position that I've kind of that I've taken in rooting myself both in the theology of the Psalms, and it really aligns with my focus of pursuing joy, because it is very possible to pursue joy in times of pain and suffering, and it helps us get through as people. As human beings, when we can find the things that we can praise about, when we can find the things that we can take joy in, when we can find the things that we know are good and are true and are lovely, and think upon those things, we find that we can navigate difficult seasons like this one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for your time today, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. And would you say the name of the Facebook group, please?
Yes, I believe it's called Praying the Psalms.
Okay.
I hope I got that right, but I'm pretty sure if you type in praying and the Psalms,
Yep.
it's going to come up, and it's a public Facebook group. And the image is the picture of the text of Psalm 1. And so if you see a group and you see the text of Psalm 1, that's the group. Anybody can join and start wherever you want to start. I think today we engage Psalm 122. But if you want to join now and start at Psalm 1, you're more than welcome to.
Right.
But
and the book
yeah,
will be
it's a great
called?
space.
Yeah, thank
the
you.
book.
Yeah.
Not ready to go public with the book yet. So
Okay. All right. Well, we'll look forward to that. All right. Great. Well, again, thank you very much. Good talking with you.
Good talking with you as well.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Bye.